Hey there! Welcome back to Behind Your Mind, a place where we gently explore the unseen corners of human behavior, psychology, and mental health. I'm really glad you're here, because today we're diving deep into a topic that's often misunderstood, misused, and even weaponized in everyday conversation: narcissism. The word narcissist gets thrown around a lot these days. He's such a narcissist. She's full of herself. They only care about their own image. But what does it really mean when someone is a narcissist? And more importantly, what lies beneath that ego? Is it just vanity? Is it toxic confidence? Or is there something deeper going on beneath the surface? Something more fragile, even broken? In this episode, we're going to gently pull back the curtain on narcissism. We'll look at what it is, what it isn't, how it can show up in everyday life, and why some people develop narcissistic traits as a way to survive, not dominate. And by the end, you might just see narcissism through a new lens, one that blends both understanding and boundaries. Let's begin by getting clear on what we're actually talking about. First things first, not everyone who posts selfies or likes compliments is a narcissist. Let's clear that up. We live in a culture that celebrates visibility. Social media thrives on image curation, confidence, and attention. But narcissism isn't just about being self-absorbed or loving the spotlight. True narcissism, especially in its clinical form known as Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD, runs much deeper. It's not just a behavior, it's a pattern of relating to the world. And ironically, it often stems not from too much self-love, but from a profound lack of it. In fact, beneath the mask of grandiosity, the "I'm better than everyone else" attitude, lies something unexpected: insecurity, shame, and sometimes even emotional abandonment. That's what makes narcissism so confusing. It looks like arrogance on the outside, but on the inside, it's often fear. What is Narcissistic Personality Disorder, NPD? Let's go to the heart of the clinical definition. Narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition marked by an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for admiration, a lack of empathy for others, and fragile self-esteem that's easily wounded by criticism. But the tricky part? People with NPD don't often seem fragile. They can appear confident, charismatic, persuasive, even magnetic. And in some cases, they are successful. But behind closed doors, relationships with narcissists often feel hollow, confusing, or even emotionally unsafe. That's because the core of narcissism isn't really about confidence. It's about survival. It's a defense mechanism, a psychological armor built to protect a very vulnerable inner world. Psychologists believe that narcissism often begins in childhood, not necessarily due to spoiling as the stereotype goes, but more often because of inconsistent love, conditional approval, or even emotional neglect. Imagine a child who only feels noticed when they perform, achieve, or act perfect. Over time, that child may start to build an identity around being special, superior, or untouchable because being ordinary meant being invisible. That's the seed of narcissism. Did you know there are actually two types of narcissism? The kind most people recognize is called grandiose narcissism. These are the loud, self-important, look-at-me personalities who dominate conversations and always need to be the smartest person in the room. But there's also something called vulnerable narcissism, which is quieter, more covert, and a bit harder to spot. Vulnerable narcissists often appear sensitive, shy, or even depressed. But they still share the same traits: a deep need for validation, difficulty handling criticism, and a fragile ego that can crumble quickly. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a relationship with someone who seems introverted, maybe even self-deprecating. But whenever you bring up a concern, even gently, they explode, retreat, or blame you entirely. That might be vulnerable narcissism. They may not brag, but they still expect emotional catering, admiration, and control, and they don't respond well to emotional challenges. Let me tell you a story about Sarah. Sarah was in a 2-year relationship with someone she described as charming but confusing. In the beginning, he was incredibly attentive, always texting, planning dates, making her feel like she was the only person in the world. But over time, things changed. He began criticizing small things, the way she dressed, how she spoke, even how she laughed. At first, it was subtle. "I'm just being honest," he'd say. Or, "I just want to help you be your best self." Eventually, Sarah began to doubt herself. She walked on eggshells, afraid to upset him. And any time she expressed sadness or needed comfort, he'd dismiss it. "You're too sensitive." Or, "It's not always about you." But here's the twist: he always needed attention. If she didn't compliment him, if she didn't respond to his needs immediately, he'd sulk or get angry. And when she finally tried to break things off, he told her no one else would love her like he did. This wasn't just a bad relationship. It was emotional manipulation rooted in narcissistic patterns, the constant need for control, admiration, and superiority, all wrapped in charm. And the hardest part? Sarah kept questioning if she was overreacting, because that's how narcissism works. It can make you doubt your own reality. Narcissistic behaviors don't just show up in romantic relationships. They weave their way into all kinds of human connections. From family dynamics to friendships, and even professional environments. Let's talk about families for a moment. Imagine a parent who constantly talks about their own achievements, even when their child is the one who just accomplished something big. Instead of celebrating the child, the parent finds a way to bring the spotlight back to themselves. Or worse, imagine a parent who only shows love when the child is behaving in ways that reflect well on them. The child becomes an extension of the parent's image, not a full human being with their own thoughts and feelings. This is a common hallmark of narcissistic parenting. Children of narcissistic parents often grow up feeling unseen, like their emotional needs were optional, or even inconvenient. They may grow into adults who feel unsure of their own worth unless they're earning love through success, caretaking, or people-pleasing. And many of them struggle with boundaries because they were never taught that their emotions mattered. It's heartbreaking, and it's more common than we'd like to admit. Friendship is supposed to be a place of safety and mutual respect. But narcissism can sneak into friendships too, especially in the form of one-sided emotional labor. Let's say you have a friend who always dominates the conversation. You've supported them through breakups, career changes, family issues, and you're happy to be there for them. That's what friends do, right? But when you need support, they vanish. They change the subject. They tell you, "Don't be so negative." Or they make it about them, again. Over time, you start to feel like your role is to cheerlead them, not to be an equal. That's not a real friendship. That's an emotional transaction. Friendships with narcissistic traits often feel draining. You leave the hangout feeling worse, not better. And if you try to create space or express your needs, they may guilt-trip you, accuse you of being selfish, or suddenly go cold. This emotional manipulation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle, silent, and slow-burning. But the result is the same. You start to lose your sense of self. Now, let's talk work. Narcissistic traits in a boss or colleague can create a toxic environment that's high pressure and low empathy. A narcissistic boss might take credit for your work, micromanage your decisions, or play favorites to maintain control. If you make a mistake, they might humiliate you publicly, but if they mess up, it's always someone else's fault. In meetings, they may dominate discussions, dismiss feedback, or twist narratives to make themselves look better. You might feel like walking on eggshells, never sure what version of them you're going to get. And if you try to advocate for yourself, you may be seen as difficult or not a team player. This dynamic breeds burnout. It leaves people feeling demoralized, unseen, and emotionally unsafe, all while the narcissistic figure continues climbing the ladder with charisma and charm. Here's something important. Narcissists are not evil. They're not cartoon villains twirling mustaches in a corner. They are often deeply wounded individuals who learned, consciously or unconsciously, that survival required armor. Psychologists like Dr. Craig Malkin describe narcissism as a spectrum. At one end, we have healthy narcissism, the confidence and self-worth we all need to function. At the extreme end, we see pathological narcissism, where empathy disappears and relationships become tools for validation or control. But in between? That's where many people live. They might not have full-blown NPD, but they show narcissistic patterns that cause harm, often without realizing it. And that's what makes it tricky. Narcissism isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's a maladaptive strategy, a way of coping with fear, inadequacy, or rejection. But even if it isn't intentional, it can still leave scars on those around them. There's a pattern often seen in narcissistic relationships that's worth mentioning here. It's called the idealize, devalue, discard cycle. It goes like this. Idealize. In the beginning, the narcissist makes you feel incredibly special. You're admired, complimented, maybe even love-bombed. It feels like you've found your soulmate, whether romantic, friendly, or professional. Devalue. Slowly, the admiration fades. They begin criticizing you, ignoring your boundaries, or making passive-aggressive comments. You feel confused, wondering what changed, and often blame yourself. Discard. Once you're no longer serving their emotional needs, or once you begin setting boundaries, they may pull away completely. Sometimes they ghost. Sometimes they lash out. Either way, you're left trying to make sense of the emotional whiplash. This cycle can repeat multiple times. And every time, it erodes your self-worth a little more, unless you begin to recognize the pattern for what it is. How to recognize red flags. So, how do you know if you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits? Here are a few signs to look out for. They lack genuine curiosity about you. They can't tolerate criticism or feedback, even gentle, constructive kinds. They shift blame easily, but take credit quickly. They expect special treatment without earning it. They're emotionally hot and cold, supportive one minute, cruel the next. They have a pattern of intense but short-lived relationships. They gaslight, making you question your own memory or feelings. You don't need all of these to be present. And again, having some narcissistic traits doesn't automatically make someone dangerous. But when these behaviors become patterns, especially in close relationships, they can become emotionally damaging. So, what do you do if you suspect someone close to you, a partner, parent, friend, or even a boss, shows signs of narcissistic behavior? Let's be real. Walking away isn't always possible, or even necessary right away. What matters most at first is awareness. When you can name what's happening, the fog starts to lift. And from there, boundaries can begin to form. Boundaries are not about changing someone else. They're about protecting your peace. You can't control whether a narcissistic person listens, respects, or agrees with your boundaries, but you can control how you reinforce them. For example, let's say someone keeps pushing you to share personal details you're not comfortable discussing. A boundary could sound like, "I'm not going to talk about that right now. Please respect my space." If they push again, you might say, "If you keep bringing this up, I'll have to leave the conversation." Notice how the focus isn't on making them change. It's about honoring your own line. Boundaries can also mean limiting your availability. Saying no without explanation. Not defending every choice. Not engaging in arguments where the goal isn't resolution, but control. At first, setting boundaries might feel scary. You may fear being guilt, manipulated, or abandoned. But with time, you'll begin to realize anyone who truly values you will also value your boundaries. This is where things get especially tricky, especially for those of us who are deeply empathetic. You may see the pain behind a narcissist's behavior. You may think, maybe if I love them enough, they'll change. But empathy without boundaries becomes enabling. It keeps both people stuck. You are not responsible for someone else's healing, especially if they're not even acknowledging the harm they cause. Your job is not to rescue someone at the cost of drowning yourself. Empathy says, I understand this may come from deep wounds. Boundaries say, but I still won't allow you to hurt me. Both can coexist. And when they do, you step into a powerful kind of self-respect, one that allows for compassion without self-abandonment. If you've been affected by someone with narcissistic traits, healing starts with reclaiming your voice. You may have spent years doubting your feelings, minimizing your pain, or walking on eggshells. So the first step is rebuilding trust with yourself. That means validating your experiences, even when others deny them. Learning to say no without guilt. reconnecting with hobbies, friendships, and goals that light you up. And, when possible, seeking therapy to process and rebuild. But what about those who recognize narcissistic traits in themselves? Believe it or not, healing is possible here too, but it takes radical honesty and a deep willingness to sit with discomfort. Many people with narcissistic patterns grew up in environments where vulnerability was punished, where only perfection was safe. So, they learned to armor up, perform, and protect their ego at all costs. Unraveling that armor takes time. It means acknowledging the ways they've hurt others, not as a shame spiral, but as a path to growth. It means learning to tolerate criticism, sit with rejection, and build relationships that are mutual, not transactional. Therapy, especially long-term psychodynamic or trauma-informed therapy, can be life-changing here. Let's take a quick look at a real-world example. Sarah grew up with a narcissistic mother who constantly compared her to others. Her accomplishments were never enough. Her mistakes were magnified, and her needs largely ignored. As an adult, Sarah became a perfectionist. She feared being disliked or dismissed. In relationships, she attracted partners who mirrored her mother's behavior, distant, critical, and emotionally unavailable. When Sarah finally saw the pattern, she felt heartbroken. She realized she'd internalized a belief that love had to be earned. With the help of therapy, she began unlearning that belief. She practiced setting boundaries with her mother, starting small, like not answering guilt-tripping messages. She also learned to grieve the parent she wished she'd had. Today, Sarah is in a supportive relationship and runs a coaching practice helping other adult children of narcissists. Her story is one of resilience and a reminder that healing is not only possible, but powerful. In some cases, especially where abuse is involved, the only safe option is to go no contact. It's not a decision to take lightly. It often comes with grief, guilt, and a period of deep reflection. But sometimes, preserving your mental health means creating distance, even from people you once loved deeply. No contact doesn't mean you're cold or cruel. It means you've chosen to stop participating in a dynamic that continually harms you. After dealing with narcissistic dynamics, trust can feel like a foreign language. You may find yourself second-guessing kind people, questioning motives, guarding your heart like a vault. That's normal. Healing isn't about never getting hurt again. It's about learning to spot red flags sooner, set boundaries faster, and believe, deep down, that you deserve relationships that feel safe, mutual, and real. You deserve to be seen, fully, without having to shrink, prove, or perform. So, as we wrap up today's story, remember this. Narcissism is not just about ego. It's about fear. The fear of being unworthy. The fear of being invisible. And sometimes, the fear of being known too deeply. When we can understand what's underneath, without excusing harmful behavior, we give ourselves the power to heal, to name the wounds, and to walk forward with greater clarity, self-respect, and compassion. You are not alone in this, and your story matters. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with someone who showed narcissistic traits? Or maybe you've seen some of these patterns in yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel seen. And remember, this content is meant for educational purposes only. If you're struggling in a relationship, please reach out to a licensed therapist or mental health professional. Healing is hard, but you don't have to do it alone. And hey, if this episode helped you understand yourself or someone else just a little better, please consider subscribing, liking, or just sharing this with someone who might need it. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, I'm right here with you, behind your mind.